me if I remove my chapeau. Delighted to be here today. I must confess that my presence was not initially solicited here today. Mr. President, Mr. Jefferson was most intending to arrive, but was somewhat infirmed in Monticello, and had called upon me through his man to arrive here today to address this august assembly. Initially somewhat surprised at the nature of the assembly. The gentlemen fairly reek of academia, and the young ladies fairly reek of pulchritude. It's a most extraordinary sight for myself. As I gaze upon the faces of some of these young ladies and the air of you gentlemen, I wonder whether my view is better than yours just now. I'm delighted to be in your company. It is a most extraordinary journey from Montpelier to be here today. But it may be a proper opportunity to discuss the nature of my friendship with Mr. Jefferson, to reflect upon some of my experiences with that gentleman over the several years we have known one another. I had first encountered Mr. Jefferson, and I was chosen to be a member of the Governor's Council back in '78 and latter part of '77. He was then governor of Virginia, was engaged certainly in the practice of defending Virginia during the course of the American Revolution. The assistance at that time bore fruit of friendship, and through the years we have maintained either a correspondence and absent with one another, or an active social engagement with one another at the President's house at Montpelier and also at Monticello. I don't know how many of you are from Virginia. Perhaps you would do me a kindness to raise your hands if you're from Virginia. And if you're from Maryland, would you? Oh, I see, they let you in. But we're delighted to have you here. Are there those not from Virginia or from Maryland? All right, quite assembly. From where you, sir? From where have you come? New York. You must know the Clintons up that way. President, Vice President. Heard of you. And yourself, sir?
Northwest Territory.
Northwest Territory. Might account for the brevity of the quaff, sir. Perhaps one of the last ones to retreat from those hostile tribes. Yes. I don't know if you know much about the president. I surely would have expected someone far more aboriginal dress than you present yourself just now. Are you acquainted with the President, Mr. Jefferson, sir?
Yes, I am.
Very good. And are you in favor of the policies he's introduced as president these last 8 years?
Yes.
Very good. I have been selected by the caucus in Congress this past January to succeed Mr. Jefferson should the Electoral College choose me this coming November. Very little effort has been exerted on my part to obtain that office, but the progress made in this country during the last 8 years under Mr. Jefferson's administration has certainly encouraged the people at large and relegated me perhaps more acquiescent to assuming the presidency should I be chosen. Mr. Jefferson and I had spent one time in a place not too different from this. In 1791 we took a journey to the northern lakes in New York, I might add, along Lake George. Are you familiar with Lake George, sir? And Lake Champlain. We went as far as Crown Point and Chimney Point, crossed from Crown Point into Chimney Point, and then went south Vermont to some extent thereafter. It was an extraordinary month and a half with one another. We had done assessments of the Hessian fly to determine its effect on crops. We had also engaged a number of citizens in the matter of agrarian practices that they had up that way in New York. I met a gentleman by the name of Taylor, a black man who had a most substantial 250-acre farm and was reputed in the area to have one of the best farms in New York. It was an extraordinary experience to visit that part of the world. Of course, being in New York, I did have to speak more slowly to the people there. Not accustomed to speaking slowly in Virginia. But That time with Mr. Jefferson probably ingratiated myself in his character and favor, than ever I had known him before. The gentleman has been maligned on several occasions by detractors, those wishing to cast animate versions upon his character. I hope before this afternoon is over we may be able to address any questions you may have about him, that we may be able to answer at least as completely as possible some of the charges levied before him in his domestic pursuits and also in his, he's been charged with questionable practices as president. One of the most extraordinary exertions on his part was the purchase of Louisiana Territory back in 1803 and consequences of the expedition that led such an extraordinary exertion from this place, Harpers Ferry, all the way to the Pacific Ocean. That undertaking was one of the most brilliant episodes, certainly in our young country's history, that we've had yet.